there's no obvious big changes in production or any changes in Strait of Hormuz condition, is really changing expectations.
And that's mainly what's driving up prices. But there's another wrinkle in the U.S.
Refinery issues have caused a massive jump in price.
Gas Buddy analyst Patrick DeHaan says an outage at a BP refinery in Indiana is causing prices to jump 40 to 80 cents in some states,
including Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, and Wisconsin. That will likely be now a significant contributor to a rise in the national average over the coming days.
The Shell station in Alabama is not feeling that bump. Chris Covey is happy he's filling up here rather than his more expensive home city of Phoenix, Arizona.
The prices there are $4.90 to $5 a gallon.
So does that mean you feel happy paying $3.99 right now?
Relatively speaking, yes.
He says it feels like a sale. Stephen Basaha, NPR News.
The Strait of Hormuz remains largely closed, and as Stephen just told us, energy prices are spiking. Will this reshape the energy world? Daniel Yergin is an energy historian and vice chairman at S&P Global. His 1992 book, The Prize, won the Pulitzer Prize, and his recent book is The New Map, Energy, Climate, and the Clash of Nations. Dan, welcome back.
Thank you.
So real quick, crude oil is very expensive. The average price of a gallon of gas in the U.S. today is $4.30. Are energy prices going to stay high right now?
By all indications, energy prices will stay high, and there's a risk they'll go higher as long as the Strait of Hormuz is closed. And what we're seeing in the United States is higher gasoline prices. In other parts of the world, they're seeing actual shortages and rationing.
Yeah, I do want to ask you about that, but just kind of contextualizing this moment, many analysts are comparing this current shock in the closure of the Strait of Hormuz to the COVID pandemic back in 2020. Supply chains failed, right? Not enough masks, not enough ventilators. Now it's our energy supply chain that is failing in a way. Are we seeing countries now taking action to Hormuz-proof their energy economies? Are they thinking about backups now?
Well, everybody's trying to figure out what do you do to minimize what is the biggest disruption in the history of modern energy. But there's not a lot that you can do in short term. If the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, it's only going to get more difficult. And what countries are doing is rationing supplies where they're really hard hit. But people will be saying, well, we need to think much more about energy security than we have in the past.
Yeah. Well, I've been reading about the energy. Crisis in some Asian countries, right? Laos has shut down gas stations. In India, restaurants have closed because they don't have enough petroleum to make food. The Philippines has an energy emergency. Vietnam has canceled flights. But there's also an electricity issue. Many Asian countries rely on natural gas from the Persian Gulf. And so now several Asian countries are restarting their coal plants. And I want to ask you about that. Coal is dirtier for the air, puts out more carbon dioxide than alternatives. Could we see a longer term rise in coal?
I think that we are seeing people turning back to coal, using coal. And as long as they're short supply of natural gas or it's very high price, they will do whatever they can to keep their electricity going and their economy going. It is, Scott, striking why this disparate effect around the world. And it's because economically, the Strait of Hormuz basically, in economic terms, flowed east. 80% of the oil from the Persian Gulf, 90% of the LNG, the natural gas all went to Asia. And by comparison, the United States is, relative to everybody else, is in a very strong position because it's energy independent and, in fact, a major supplier of energy to the world.
4 countries that are still very dependent on fossil fuels from the Persian Gulf. Many of them, have been moving toward renewables, wind and solar. Could they speed that up? Not necessarily for the climate, but to make them again Hormuz-proof?
I think that's a shift now in terms of looking at renewables, wind and solar, in terms of energy security, not in terms of climate. And that's a big turnaround. And I think that's going to be one of the lasting effects. That addresses electricity. And even before the crisis, 90% of the new generating capacity adding around the world was wind and solar. It doesn't replace liquid fuels, which you need for transportation or people use for cooking in India. We can go down the list of things, or making fertilizer, for instance. But I think this is definitely a boost for renewables as part of an energy security matrix.
You mentioned the United States. You and I have spoken over the years how the U.S. has become an oil and natural gas super producer, right? Largely because of this technology to fracture or frack rocks that have oil and natural gas inside. And yet today, Americans are paying on average $4.30 a gallon. Remind us why that's the case.
Well, the reason is that at the end of the day, there's only one global oil market, even if it's fractured somewhat, and the prices from the rest of the world radiate back to the United States. We're not seeing shortages, we're not seeing gas lines or anything like that, but we are seeing prices tick up because of that. The other thing to keep your eye on is jet fuel. Persian Gulf, those Arab countries were major sources of jet fuel, and shortages of jet fuel are developing around the world. Airlines are canceling flights. But the U.S., relatively to everybody else, is in a much better position because of our energy endowment.
Another big oil exporter, of course, is Russia. And now in this war, it is selling each barrel for a lot of money, more than $100 in part because sanctions against Russian oil have been paused. So they're making a lot more money. To what degree is Moscow another winner here in the world energy map?
Oh, Russia's definitely a winner. I saw an excerpt of Putin speaking at the Kremlin about a week or so ago, and he looked so smug and so self-satisfied. Now, the Ukrainians are doing everything they can to disrupt the Russian supply chains, attacking refineries, attacking export ports. But basically, he's doing well out of this, as China is doing well out of this relatively.
And then there's the question of OPEC. Tomorrow, we know the cartel is going to lose a key member, key exporter, the United Arab Emirates, which in this war, of course, has been attacked by Iran, another OPEC member. We spoke this week to Here and Now business analyst Robin Farzad, and here's what he told us.
They can't feign friendship anymore. You know, you guys hold hands and there's unanimity when there are OPEC and OPEC plus meetings, but let's not forget what's just happened between Iran and the rest of the Arab Gulf. UAE in particular has been shelled, 2,800 times? So they're supposed to go back to the table after this and pretend that nothing happened?
So Dan Jurgen, OPEC, with fewer members and with more oil in the world produced outside of OPEC, including in the United States, is OPEC going forward, have less influence?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. It's a very important step. Smaller countries, smaller producers like Ecuador and Angola have left OPEC in the past, and it really hasn't mattered. But the UAE is a big producer that intends to become a bigger producer and wants to go along its own path. And I think this reflects tensions. Iran has attacked the UAE more than it's attacked Israel. But also, there's a competition between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And I think it also has to do with sending a message to Washington.
Dan Jurgen, another big structural change in world energy is all these data centers going up around the world, certainly not far from me in Northern Virginia, to power the AI race. These data centers are so energy thirsty. With this demand and with the fragility in natural gas and oil, what sources of energy are going to make all this electricity?
The big tech companies, the hyperscalers, are going to spend upwards of $700 billion this year building data centers. And some estimate that that's equal to about half of all of U.S. economic growth. Our estimates are that data center consumption of electricity in the U.S. will rise from a current level of about 5% to as much as 14%, some say 17% by 2030, which is not very far off. So there's a real race to assure that the electricity supplies are there. And even before the boom started, we were already looking at tight supplies for electricity in the U.S. So this is a major question. And the challenge is where's electricity going to come from? How much is going to be generated by natural gas? How much by renewables? When will nuclear start to become a bigger element again? One of the striking things is the turnaround from 5 years ago in terms of nuclear, where it was sort of seen on its way out. And these nuclear power plants were going to be closed. We're actually seeing nuclear power plants that were closed that are now being brought back to life again because of the electricity needs. And of course, there's a lot of focus on nuclear technologies like small modular reactors, although that will take time. But we think of energy security in terms of oil and gas, but it's also now very much a question of electricity.
Daniel Jurgen is an economic historian and vice chair at S&P Global. Dan, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Grand afternoon. Headed to the Tesla charging station near my house. Finishing up on my errands as I left Botany Hydroponics, as you saw in the video. And I love listening to talk radio. And as you can see, they're talking about the very high cost for a barrel of oil and the very high cost for a gallon of gas. Gas is now throughout the nation averaging $4.30 per gallon. Wow. $4.30 per gallon you guys are paying for a gallon of gas on average. That's crazy. That is crazy. And they're talking about how you have big oil producers, I believe, like Saudi Arabia and etc., are now leaving OPEC. The big producers, I believe Saudi Arabia is now leaving OPEC because of the political change that's going on with this U.S.-Iran war, which continues the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz, which is still shut down really because of the U.S. and Iran embargo. There's no merchant ships going in and out. It's crazy. It's crazy. So we have all these things that are happening that is affecting the economy on a global scale of oil. And I'm seeing now, and I've already been offered a buyout for my used Tesla. And actually, it's a pretty good buyout too. Tesla sales have gone up by 100 and something %, they're saying, because the high price of gasoline, meaning that thousands of people are now buying electric cars like Tesla. They're buying these cars. They're buying them. As I back up in here to charge up real quick, they're buying these cars. So Tesla sales have went through the roof right now, because who wants to continue to pay these horrible high prices to fuel their car? You know what it's costing me to get 300 miles on a full charge? You guys are going to be mad. I think it's about 12, 13 bucks. 12 to 13 bucks for 300 miles on a full charge. 300 miles on a full charge. That's what it's costing me. And I can also charge up at home on my off-grid solar for free. Take me a little bit longer. So imagine the money I'm saving by driving a Tesla EV right now. I'm saving lots and lots of money. Tons of money. And I'm not going to go into the other awesome capabilities of electric vehicles. But anyway, you've been listening to Talk Radio with Regenerative Life Wayne, as I come back from running my errand to get some supplies for my I'm setting up my second large aquaponic system with a very large grow bed. I'm setting that up, so I needed some supplies, and I got some other things too, as you saw. So I'm gonna charge up my Tesla real quick, and then I'm gonna head back home because we're supposed to get some rain. We are supposed to get some rain, and I'm hoping we do get that rain. So I'm trying to get home real quick before the rain comes, and I'm gonna need that rain to fill up my rain harvesting barrels and to fill up my 300-gallon Rubbermaid tub that I'm using for my sump. So you guys have a nice day. Remember, we have to start thinking outside the box. We have to start doing things our way to feed ourselves, to harvest our own power, all that.